event comprises of welcome address, panel discussion by the moderator, Mr. Rajesh, and the Q&A session. And finally, we will conclude with the vote of thanks. So now let's begin to the event. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you for this IMC in association with Business Standard Smart Business Seminar on impact of COVID on food supply chain. On behalf of IMC, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all our participants today and panelists for sparing their valuable time over here. Now, as we begin the session, may I request Mr. Ashish Ved, President of IMC, to present the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anita, and good evening and a very warm welcome to everybody. Ajit and me are in the IMC Chamber of Commerce in the building today and addressing you. It's a pleasure to see all of you. It's my pleasure to extend a hearty welcome to each one of you. COVID-19 pandemic forced a national lockdown on our country on 24th March 2020. As a result, there was a massive disruption in the food supply chain. Food factories were closed, crops did not move from farms to factories to food outlets. Retail prices of essential commodities spiked in April. From May, lockdown has been eased for agriculture and food processing. Food supplies are now normalizing. However, there is a massive destruction of demand because of the lockdown. While the pan-India lockdown continues to create challenges in the availability of labor and transport in the agricultural sector, the central and state governments have taken various measures to fight the pandemic. But the food supply chain for vegetables, fruits, and other daily essentials is facing one of the worst setbacks. Industries calibrated to supply consumers with necessities are finding it difficult to cope with the sudden surge in demand. In this background, IMC and Business Standard are jointly organizing online seminar on impact of COVID on Indian food supply chain. In my opinion, current reforms initiated by the government will provide an impetus for the agricultural sector, while in the long run, it will ensure India's food security and supply chain in a self-sufficient manner. It will lead us to the Prime Minister's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-reliant India. The amendments to the Essential Commodities Act, dismantling the APMC and a new price signaling system will help farmers get best prices for their produce and ensure farm-to-fork chain. A panel of experts will discuss different aspects of food supply chain challenges, including post-harvest logistics, marketing, retailing, technology, infusion, innovation, and business promotion. They will throw light on revival of food businesses, food inflation outlook, and Kharif crop prospects. I would like to thank all our speakers for consenting to be a part of this event, and a special thanks to Business Standard for associating with this event with IMC. Just a few words about the IMC. Set up in 1907, IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry is a premier chamber of commerce, trade and industry in the Western region with a membership base of 3,000 members and 175 trade associations affiliated to it. Together, we represent and advocate the interest of over 4 lakh businesses and industry establishments from diverse sectors of industry. Through its various industry-specific committees, the IMC provides policy inputs and recommendations at various levels of government authorities and organizes interactive dialogues, workshops, seminars, business conferences, and other activities for sustainable economic development. To provide quality service to members and the society at large, enabling them to grow qualitatively and quantitatively, to make India a strong economic nation. IMC has selected Innovate, Motivate, and Consolidate as its theme for this year. Let us all pray for a good monsoon and a good crop, which will help India reboot its economy in these troubled times. Once again, I thank you all and welcome you all to this interesting event. I'm sure you will all go back enriched, and thank you for participating in large numbers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Mr. Rajesh Bhayani, Associate Editor, Business Standard, to lead the panel discussion.
Thank you, Anita.
Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Vaid Sahib. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives us great pleasure in welcoming member of Indian Merchant Chamber to the Business Standard Smart Business event. We are very glad to associate with the Indian Merchant Chamber for this event. Business Standard, let me say a few words about this, so you all know. But since last 45 years, it has been a choice of serious readers about their financial content and analysis. And we are thankful to readers, you all, and for recognizing us as a quality leader and appreciating our editorial integrity, which is maintained by the team of India's best financial journalists and editors and contributors. So we have tried to give relevant, actionable content to our readers in the newspaper and at the event like this that bring industry and policy makers together. We often organize discussion that tap into collective wisdom of decision makers and influence the business and economy. Smart Business is one such event series where we work with industry bodies and trade association at a local level and get a perspective on specific issues that are of concern to them. And associating with Indian merchant chambers and discussing a topic of a national importance, it's also an important occasion. The Smart Business event platform hosts different voices related to the topic to get an all-round view. Now, we have already organized more than 200 such events in the last few years. And it's a continuous initiative of Business Standard. Apart from that, we also have several other initiatives on annual roundtables and annual award function, mutual fund and financial market related events. So let me briefly say what we intend to discuss here. As Mr. Vaid has already said that there were initial problems in supply chain where farmers producing a good amount of vegetables and grains and all, but not reaching to the market or users or even processors. And there was spoilages, other reports, and industry was demanding since long and more aggressively after these problems came to light that there has to be freedom to farmers to sell their produce directly to processors. There has to be avenues by which farmer can also get a better price and better market and not limited to the mandi where he is compelled to sell. Even there were talks of, there were roadblocks because of Essential Commodity Act, and whenever prices rise, it was creating an uncertainty in the mind of food value chain of that agri commodity, where even despite market fundamentals requires processors to store commodities for the future requirement to keep their cost under check. This uncertainties was a big issue. So now government has come out with some 3 legislations. They have removed 7 commodities from the purview of Essential Commodity Act. Especially, they have kept out agri value chain of that commodity from the storage controls. And there are some indications about how the prices will be determined, but we need to debate those issues about the effectiveness of the act and how really it is helping to address all those challenges which were there earlier. Even one of the provision is for providing e-market facilities, providing a facility to farmer to sell to whomsoever he like. And ultimate aim is to make all India as a one market. So these are all initiatives taken in past, but was not catching up because of these APMC norms. And as such, the biggest freedom given to farmer is that APMC jurisdiction has been confined to the mandi area or a physical area in which that market is functioning. This is aimed at improving services by APMCs to farmers, and also giving farmers and traders and processors a greater freedom. So hopes are that farmer will earn more, their income will go up, and whatever they save on mandi says, if they don't go to APMC and sell directly, they will also be benefit from this cost which otherwise they were incurring, and some saving in transports. So these are the basic outline on which the event will be debating further details. That as and when the issue comes out, we'll discuss that. I would also like to introduce our the panel. It's a very eminent panel. we have Atul Chaturvedi, who is Executive Chairman of Renuka Sugar and Director of Adani Wilmar. Atul Bhai is a veteran in commodity market, in veg oil industry and sugar. And prior to, I mean, since 1998, he is associated with Adani Wilmar. He's director there. And Atul Bhai has been with the Solvent Extractor Association, he's president there, body of veg oil industry. Is also a deputy chairman of Soybean Processor Association and associated with CII and other task forces edible oil, related to edible oil and oilseeds. And he has also played some important role in some international organization, and his inputs are always considered valuable when government is forming policy. And we also have with us Mr. Rajendra Barwale. He is the chairman of MICO. MICO is a almost 56-year-old company. MICO Grow. MICO is a flagship of MICO Grow, and is into seed. But just not that he is the first. His company was the first to introduce BT cotton into India in 2002. And that is where the cotton crop and seed technology, the real improvement began. There may be some issues in technology and all that we will discuss when the time comes. MICO introduced this BT cotton along with the multinational Monsanto in 2002. Is also a leader and an authority in hybrid seed, and even associated with the International Seed Federation of Switzerland and all. So apart from that, we have Mr. Venkatachalam Shunmugam. He's a very senior economist. He has spent a good amount of years with the MCX Stock Exchange, then dealing in currency. So as an economist, his contribution would be very interesting in terms of with the financial market experts, the trading technology, the man who has seen all those things happening and innovating in India since long. He is there. I think he has spent 1.5 decades in the exchange industry itself. And the last he was with MCX as a head of research and index administration. And we also have Amit Agarwal. He is a co-founder and CEO of AgriBazaar, a platform formed by Star Agri, one of the collateral management company. And AgriBazaar is a agri-tech platform which facilitates transaction of agriculture commodity by connecting farmers and buyers of agri commodities. Besides that, his company is also facilitating transactions. The platform offers services like selling seeds, providing farm intelligence to farmers via a artificial intelligence based intelligence system, and also helping farmers in getting finances apart from collateral management. So those who have taken benefit of, those farmers taken benefit of such platforms have seen the fruits of how online trading and such services helps them, which otherwise they were not getting from APMCs. And last but not least, we have G. Chandrasekhar, who is a director at Indian Merchant Chamber Economic Research Foundation. And people know him since long. People are also aware about his views, read them in business line, and also see him frequently on business channels. His important contribution is also in forming regulations for commodities, because he is an independent member of SEBI's Commodity Derivative Advisory Committee. And his inputs for policy formings are always considered valuable. So with this, see how we will go. I'll briefly tell you that I request all the speakers. We'll start with Atul Bhai to give 5 to 7 minutes introduction of what's happening in their area and issues. And then later on, we'll have some internal panel discussions. After that, we'll open a floor for question answers. So Atul bhai, I request you to make a beginning about the subject and all.
Thank you, Rajesh bhai, and thank you for that wonderful opening remarks which you've made. I belong to the vegetable oil sector, and now I'm associated with sugar as well. So I would much rather confine my remarks to these two sectors alone. Both these sectors, which is sugar as well as edible oil, fall into the space of essential commodity. And being an essential commodity, we were relatively less affected compared to other sectors of the economy. So that has been a silver lining as far as we are concerned. When the lockdown started way back in March, the crushing activity of soybean, of sugar had actually come to an end in Maharashtra and Karnataka, where our plants are located. So the supply chain as far as sugar in these two states is concerned has never been a problem, because COVID actually started, the lockdown started towards the end of March. However, in the UP, the crushing continued right up to parts of June. So there also we did not see too much of a hiccup as far as crushing activity and the supply chain of raw material to the sugar plants is concerned. On the oilseed side, we definitely had a big challenge. The mustard marketing actually started in the month of early March, or rather mid-March. And there, at that point of time, most of the APMCs and the market yards were closed because of social distancing and all the norms which the government had set in. With the results that we were not able to run our crushing plants or mustard-related plants or soybean plants reasonably well. The same goes with castor, which is not an essential commodity, and because it was not an essential commodity, the local authorities did not allow us to run the plant. So castor and mustard were affected. But once the lockdown started getting lifted and the APMC was allowed to start functioning, things have become quite normal and all the plants are running full blast. So there is no problem as of today. Initially, there were problems in terms of labor also, and I think a lot has been already talked about the labor issues. So I would not dwell too much on that. So that definitely was a challenge to start with, but things have eased out now. On the edible oil import front, we definitely faced a lot of challenges as far as imports into the country from Malaysia and Indonesia is concerned, because these countries were also practicing lockdown, with the result that our vessels were getting delayed. In the month of May, you would see that Indian imports had plunged to one of the all-time lowest. We imported only about something like 700,000 tons of oil, which was probably one of the lowest in the last 8-10 years. So that was affected, but come June, things have normalized. But receiving of the oil in the Indian ports was fantastic. In fact, for a change, Indian ports were absolutely working like clockwork precision. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that for a change, the Indian bureaucracy acted very, very proactively. And in fact, you just send a mail across to Delhi and next day you would have a result. In fact, I've seen for the first time in my life, notifications getting issued within 12 to 14 hours of the problem being seen. So to that extent, that helped ease the supply chain as far as the raw material into the plants is concerned. So that was a good welcome sign. One area where we faced a little bit of a problem to start with was our factory started running, but then because we are more or less in the packed goods segment, getting packing material and chemicals was a challenge, because we were working with those guys and they were falling under the lockdown zone or COVID zone. So that was a bit of a challenge. So that did not allow us to run full blast as far as May is concerned or early part of June. But come mid-June, things became very normal, and now we are able to run our plants practically almost like 85–90% of the capacity of the pre-COVID levels. Marketing was definitely an interesting learning experience for all of us. The consumer behavior during the lockdown times also has undergone a massive change. And for us who are there involved in marketing, it has been a real learning experience. Labor and the logistics definitely was, to start with, a huge problem. Getting trucks was a nightmare, because if the truck went to Delhi, so that the driver was not willing to return back, because on the way the police was catching him and then putting him in the quarantine zones and things like that. So that affected things big time. In fact, on some days we had trucks reaching Delhi almost taking 7 to 8 days, because they were kept aside. So then all these things gradually eased, and I think Delhi, the bureaucracy also came into play very fast, and this got eased. So second half of May, the supply chain as far as supplying the goods to cities was quite all right. Now I would say we have reached almost 85–90% of the pre-COVID levels. What we are seeing in these times is that the modern format stores or the malls, they are all closed practically, largely because of social distancing and all these issues. So that sector is in serious trouble. People are just not willing to go to the malls, and that segment of our marketing is getting affected big time. The other big challenge which we have faced during this COVID times is that you could send the goods across to your main distributor, whose job it is to distribute within the city. But then, because of all these restrictions and the shops being allowed to open till 5 o'clock and then subsequently 7 o'clock and all those restrictions, he much rather prefers to sell it from his counter. So in a city, you could have a scenario where some parts of the city are well distributed and goods are, all the goods are available, and in the other part of the city is just not available. And secondly, the other thing which we've seen in these times is that just as the companies are not willing to give credit because they are not sure whether the money is going to come back or not, the whole supply chain is vary in terms of giving credit. So the distributor is not giving credit to the retailer, and retailer subsequently is not giving credit to the consumer. So this is resulting in the supply chain getting squeezed quite a lot, and excess goods are not getting piled up either at the distributor's joint or at the retailer's joint. So I think the silver lining in all this is that the supply chain is becoming much more effective and much better managed. The same goes for edible oil imports as well, where now the country is running at almost within 10 days, you have vessels coming in from Malaysia, Indonesia, and the oil gets lifted and the factories are running with very low inventory levels. So the supply chain, Indians have learned to live with much lower inventory levels. One thing which we have seen is that we are also engaged in exports. Exporting goods is a nightmare, and this is where the labor issue has become a big challenge. From Kandla, you had labor going back to Bihar or UP, and they've still not come back. In fact, at Kandla, normal loading of sugar used to be in about 7,000 to 8,000 tons. And now the day when we are able to achieve a 3,500 ton loading of vessel, so for us, that becomes an achievement. So that is one area where the government and whoever is the decision maker will need to look at very seriously. Otherwise, our exports are going to suffer big time. And the only exports, agri exports, which are currently happening are maybe rice and sugar. Because sugar, we are looking at an export of about 5.5 million tons, and actually loading vessels is currently a challenge. The other challenge is in the loading of the containers, because container arrival into the country is heavily affected, and that is because of the lack of container availability, that sector is also suffering, exports through containers. So that one interesting phenomena which we are seeing is obviously the out-of-home consumption is in serious trouble, and all those things. I think a lot has been talked about, and that there's nothing much to add to that. But what we are seeing is the direct-to-home consumption is marginally increasing. Now, with people confined to their home, what we are seeing is that their direct buying into the house via the online channels or e-commerce or via the neighborhood retailer has increased big time. I would not be surprised if direct-to-home consumption has actually gone up by about 15%. But the bulk pack sizes, which is like 15 liter for edible oil and about 50 kg for sugar, that segment is in serious trouble. Our experience of last couple of months is actually telling us that the buying in the out-of-home section, or the horeca as we call them, that has plummeted by almost 60%. And that is where the big challenge as far as the country is concerned is going to be. What we are seeing is the demand destruction as far as edible oil is concerned is likely to be something like 2 million tons for the full year. And the maximum loss will be of palm oil, which is going largely into the out-of-home consumption. Similarly, in sugar also, we would not be surprised if we lose about 1.5 to 2 million tons of consumption. On a very rough basis, sugar consumption in a country, domestic consumption is about 26 million tons. And one should not be too surprised if it plummets to about 24. Similarly, edible oil consumption in a country which was growing at about 3 to 4% per annum, we should not be too surprised if it contracts about 2%, which means the swing could actually be close to about 6% compared to what it was last year. So last year, Indian consumption was closer to about anything between 22.5 to 23 million tons. This year, our take is that it's going to be lower by about 2 million tons. And all this loss will largely be of palm oil. So the sufferers on that count would be both Malaysia and Indonesia. With the consumers becoming much more health conscious, we are seeing a perceptible change as far as the buying pattern is concerned. Now, loose buying in the direct to home is becoming a no-no. So the lady of the house or the housewife is just not willing to buy loose things, obviously because of the health reasons, which means the packed goods segment is gaining big time. So what we are seeing is part of that loss which has happened in the out-of-home consumption has actually been compensated by direct-to-home in the small pack segment. So overall, this is a good sign, and I would not be too surprised if going forward, we see India seriously banning all loose edible items, which is definitely something which we look forward to and which we as an association have been actually fighting with the government to do this. The other thing which we are seeing is that rural demand or the demand from smaller towns has increased big time. Whether it is an effect of the agriculture being is doing well, or with labor going back to the villages, we don't know. But the fact remains that the rural demand is much stronger than what it was earlier. So that is another change which we are seeing in these COVID times. On the food inflation, my comment is that we do not foresee any food inflation hitting us. The world has adequate sugar. Brazil is diverting more sugarcane juice into sugar instead of ethanol. So last year, Brazil produced about 26 million tons. This year, they are likely to produce something like 36 million tons of sugar. That means about 10 million tons additional. As far as India is concerned, last year our production was close to about 27 million tons of sugar. This year is likely to be back to 32.5 to 33 million tons. The other thing is that this time rain gods seem to be Indian, and we've got rain starting in time and bountiful. So what we are seeing, and the spatial distribution of the rains is also pretty good. So Madhya Pradesh, parts of Rajasthan, Western India like Maharashtra, Gujarat, they've all got good rains. And this is the area which is much more as far as the relevant as far as the oilseed is concerned. So what we are seeing till now, as if you look at the numbers till about 25th of June, soya has been planted almost like 50 or 60% of what they normally plant for the full year. It's on a track. Same with groundnut. One casualty is castor, which actually now means that the Indian farmer is very smart and reacts to price signals. Last year, soya and groundnut both sold above the minimum support prices. And this year, the crop, or at least the planting, looks to be rebounding big time. Castor, the values which the farmers got was much less than, there is no MSP in castor. So you see castor lagging behind. And normally when you have good rains, then castor actually lags. So oilseed could actually rebound big time this year. The rains have been good. And if it continues during July and August, I'm sure we could be in for good times. So all these things are not going to allow food inflation to happen in this country. That's all from my side. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. I think Raju Barwale ji, Rajendra Barwale, the chairman of MICO, Maharashtra Hybrid Seed Company. Please make your opening remark.
Thank you, Rajesh Bhai. Am I audible?
Yeah, very much.
Good. Thank you. President IMC, panelists, and people who are attending the webinar. First of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to share my views on the agri-input sector. I think after Mr. Chaturvedi's talk, there is very little left for me to talk. But given the time by the moderator, I just make some comments on as we see the agri-input sector. I would restrict my comments to the seed sector because that's the area where we have been working for many years. I would reiterate the points made by Atul Chaturvedi ji that seed also is an essential commodity, and therefore the sector could gain from the proactiveness of the government in making sure that seeds are available from the farm to the processing plants of the seed companies, and from the seed companies, processing plants to the markets. We also felt great response from both central and state governments, and I have probably, this is the second time I have seen government acting in, not minutes but seconds, issuing of ordinances and notifications that came very handy. People working in agriculture know that seeds are very critical input, and which was recognized by the government. So fortunately, what has happened now with the proactiveness of the government and the support received through our associations, the Kharif season has gone off pretty well. I would say one of the better seasons, and with the favorable monsoon, both in terms of time, in terms of distribution, and also in terms of quantum. Kharif plantings are at a peak, and I would say they would get over in next 2 weeks. And I also fully feel that we do not anticipate any lag on Kharif production, more so on oilseeds, as rightly said by Atul Bhai, and also on other crops, including cotton. The industry also had logistics challenges, of course, which were resolved by persistence of the industry, by the organizations themselves. The seed has to move from Coimbatore to, say, Faridkot in Punjab, but it was achieved, though with a time lag, and with passage of time, things have improved, and I would rather say things are quite normal. So COVID or no COVID, I think the seed industry has done reasonably well with their own work and with the support of the government, and of course with the support of their customers and other stakeholders. I'll just highlight 2-3 points which I feel have made an impact, and going forward it would make greater impact on organizations who probably do not adopt them. What we have seen that seed companies who are more automated, both in their processes, management processes, on the factory floor, etc., were able to cope up with the things much quicker and adapt to the changing situations, while companies which were still in partial manual mode would have had a greater impact. Automation, I mean by that digitization, computerization, everything else, working from home is also an automation kind of thing. And probably what we have seen in our organization, that working from home has resulted into greater oversight on people, greater feedback, greater supervision, and connecting more frequently with people, which would physically would not have happened. One bigger impact on agriculture, Atul Bhai mentioned about health consciousness increasing in the customer's mind, in the housewife's mind, and no housewife is prepared to compromise on safety. So going forward, traceability will become an important aspect. It is important, but it will become much more important, and companies will have to adapt and make sure that they are able to satisfy their customers on this aspect. There can be also changes in consumption patterns. There would be greater emphasis on eating things which are healthy. Like people would like to eat more green things, more nutritious things, etc. And those kinds of things can have impact on the cultivation, on the farmers' demand for seeds, etc. One more result of this COVID pandemic has been that government has acted on number of things which they were supposed to act for many years, with changes in policy reforms, general policy reforms. We heard about Essential Commodities Act. We heard about other acts which are hindering the free market behavior for agriculture produce. And hopefully, as these changes and transformations roll out, things would become much more efficient going forward. But I think there is also transformation which probably is required at our end, in the sense, in the input side, where we, to become an agriculture power, global agriculture power, we need to make sure that our agriculture is both quality and cost competitive. And the very important aspect for that is, our cost of production, irrespective of MSP or no MSP, should be comparable to any other thing globally. And for that, I think government is discussing with the industry about technology infusion, modernization, and things like that. And I hope that these things are brought into practice, and we see our agriculture emerging as a global quality and cost player. Though we are producing large quantities in many areas, but we need to compete on quality and cost. I'll restrict my comments to now in terms of time, and of course, with the permission of the moderator, happy to answer questions at the end of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rajendra. I'll request Mr. Shunmugam to make his presentations. Perhaps agri-economy has assumed a significance nowadays. I remember prior to 1991, India was known as a agri-focused country. And despite all those changes, innovations and development, manufacturing and all, today in the time of crisis, agri has assumed, and agri sector has been the survivor for India's economy. But give your views on this.
Thank you, Rajesh ji. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Rajesh ji, and esteemed panelists over here. And first of all, let me thank IMC and Mr. Chandrasekhar for kindly inviting me to provide my views on this panel. Actually, so in fact, after two corporate stalwarts in the agri processing and then the input industry talking about, I'm left with very less to talk about. But I've collected some figures and since I started my career with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that so I looked at this the entire agriculture sector from a very broader perspective, and then followed it up with in the commodity markets area and things like that. I picked up some few areas which I wanted to highlight in terms of things which we should work on basically at this time, post the COVID times, actually, in terms of improving and also to achieve one, India to become a superpower in agriculture, and two, to double the farmers' income, actually. So I think if we do the two, I mean, one is given. So if we increase the farmers' income, naturally they're going to increase the productivity, and production is going to increase, and so we will be able to, so we'll become an Atmanirbhar Bharat, even in terms of, as Atulji was saying, I mean, exports of edible oil may become or should become a history as we become Atmanirbhar and edible oils, actually. So coming back to the topic of the impact of the COVID-19 on the supply chain and the disruption that it had, actually. So it more or less coincided with the Rabi season, the end of the Rabi season, actually. So the end of the Rabi season. So most of the crop, almost more, 60 or 70% of the crop for the entire year has been harvested, had been kept where it has to be, and has been processed and moved to the distributors and things like that, actually. So the effect is only on 25 to maximum 30% of the total food grain production, which is about 285. But that comes on the back of our production, this year, which is also going to be a record production, which is about 285 million tons actually. And the record production also led to a record storage as usual, because as you must be aware, the public system for storage, which includes FCI, the CWC and SWC, are only about 75 million tons as a storage actually, but they ended up storing about 115 million tons, and so that is basically because they were able to hire more of spaces and then store whatever that has been procured actually, and in line with the government aspirations, basically to to increase the farmers' income and also to ensure that the farmers get the MSP, the public granaries also got loaded up actually. But what eased the situation was, these granaries had the grains which had got accumulated in the granaries had got an opportunity to be distributed to the migrant laborers, who had started up from their working places to their hometowns, and they were left with no food and things like that. So the government decided that we should give it to the migrant laborers and things like that actually. So as a result, some freeing up of warehousing had happened, and some some easing up of the the warehousing space had happened actually. So that's one challenge which is the country is facing in terms of warehousing capacities on a macro sense actually. Then coming back to the the prices, I would look at the prices of the commodities most from one which are connected to the international trade and one which are connected to the domestic trade. So on the commodities which are connected to international trade, on the import side, mainly we are on the edible oil. This one. So edible oil, Atulji had clearly covered it. Edible oil did not have any major disruption in terms of imports coming into the country and things like that. So we didn't see any price movements in edible oils. But obviously in other smaller crops such as spices and things like that, there was a huge effect in terms of prices actually. Prices of, let's say, for example, I'm just quoting it from the commodity derivatives industry. Prices of turmeric had gone down to a 3 years low. Jeera went to a 3-year low. Cardamom went to a 1-year low. That is to say that the plantation sector, the price realization by the plantation sector owners and the spice growers actually had taken a huge hit in terms of what the prices that they could get actually. And as it was told by Atulji and also by Barwaleji, is that the international trade has almost come to a standstill. But I'm happy to hear that it's picking up actually. So the latest story is that the ships are not moving anywhere basically because the rotation of the staff in the shipping industry, which was bound to happen, couldn't happen basically because ships are not allowed to onboard or deboard the employees, which is a normal rotation that they do when they reach a particular destination, things like that. And that's a big problem in the international trade actually. So it would need a little bit of a time basically to achieve, as Atulji was rightly mentioning, to achieve the pre-COVID levels of international trade. It would take another, or I would put it to the benchmarks of the so-called if we have a medicine or or a vaccine against COVID, then probably we can come back to the normal situation of trade. Assuming that the transportation is a constraint. But again, the constraint may also come from the demand side because the economies are shrinking, So in fact, in the latest analysis of IMF, out of the 142 or 143 countries, what they have mentioned in the major emerging markets, scenario, except for China, none of the emerging markets, none of the developing markets are showing any symptom of growth. I mean, all of them are on the negative side in terms of their GDP actually. So that will lead to a little bit of a demand side, reduction and, on the global trade side actually. On the, domestic side, of course, for the two consecutive, lockdowns that have happened, there was a little bit of a confusion and lack of directives and things like that, that led to lack of coordination between the officials who are implementing the lockdown and the food processing industry and the food distribution industry and things like that actually. So that led to a complete, a stoppage of food processing, distribution, and raw material procurement and then things like that actually. And on the supply chain side, for the farmers, access to markets has been a complete haywire in terms of they are not able to access the markets. They were, those who don't have access to warehouses couldn't store their produce. Those who don't have access to labor because the labor had moved out to the places from where they have come in, had no labor to actually process and package the produce that they have produced. And that has been a problem, especially, which I have seen in, spices crops, I have seen in, chilies, and I've seen in cotton and things like that actually. So that's another big, challenge that, the COVID had pushed us to. The other is, I think, we have heard a lot from, Atulji regarding the food processing products. One, their access to raw material has been a challenge for the first two, lockdowns which had happened, and access to consumers had also been a challenge actually. And the third challenge is, the closure of the restaurant and hospitality industries, which constitute about 30 to 35% of total processed and agriculture commodity consumption actually. So that led to a huge demand erosion actually, and that's where I think I completely agree with Atulji's view that food inflation is something we might not see in the near term to come, probably for 6 months to 7 months to come, but maybe increasing unless there is a serious stocking up which is happening on the consumer side and things like that, which is not going to happen unless there is a serious outbreak as a second corona outbreak actually. And third, those supply chains which were operating, I'd seen, I'd actually read stories of, some innovative supply chain operators actually, especially in the perishable products, on the vegetables actually. They were literally saying that, their cost of distribution had increased by 40 to 45%. But at the same time, the demand has also not been keeping up pace with, and so they were not able to actually reap better returns to whatever the efforts that they are putting in terms of distributing the foods and the vegetables to the households actually. So that's a cost of distribution has also been a big, this one actually. And so these are big challenges from a, supply chain perspective. On the demand side, food processing demand had come down. Income augmentation, which was pretty much expected, did not happen actually. But obviously, government had come forward and said that we will procure all the grains which are left out with the farmers at the supply at the minimum support price. So that'll provide a little bit of a support to the farmers, and so they might go in for a good kharif sowing. Closure of international trade on the demand side, and the prohibitive, safety norms, which actually led to the delay which Barwalaji was, explaining, and the delays which Atulji was explaining, which led to the, wastage of products, unnecessary delays in the supply chain and things like that, leading to cost of distribution increasing over a period in time. Hopefully it should get resolved pretty soon, and the borders are opening up, and so there should not be any confusion henceforth. On the supply side, which I have been mentioning, which I've seen basically on Italy right from day one, because after China, Italy was the next affected country. If you all have been following the corona outbreak which has been happening, Italy had made sure that one, there is enough of raw material which is available for the processors, and two, there is enough of processed products which is available to the consumers actually, and make sure that there's no food this one, which obviously somehow missed out of our our planning process in the lockdown 1 and lockdown 2, but it certainly hit the the policy making at the at the central level and at the state level actually, that led to relaxation, but yet there were like the cross-border transportation confusion, things like that confused. But I think the lockdown 4, I mean, we have almost like resolved all these problems from a policy perspective in terms of stabilizing supplies actually. And the other one which Atulji had rightly indicated is that like e-commerce platforms actually are increasingly being used by the the consumers actually, who had either their neighborhood stores are closed up, and they are not having the brands that they would want to have actually. So they resorted to e-commerce companies, and e-commerce companies, especially Amazon, had responded exceptionally well, making available all what you need on their platform. But of course, sometimes there were some constraints in making available the brand that you would need actually. And on the other hand, the production system got affected, but probably it is coming back to the normalcy by now, as Atulji had rightly indicated. What's the opportunity that the corona had given? Basically, the opportunity is let me go back before I tell about the opportunity in another minute or so. On the commodity market side, because there was a confused signals about information about the supply and demand for commodities are coming into the agriculture commodities, the volatility in the agriculture commodities has been very high actually. So because of that, the margins which are collected by the exchanges went up a little higher than what it used to be in the pre-COVID era. And so as a result, the liquidity had declined. And so what we thought, the supply chain should participate in the commodity derivative market to hedge their exposures became a dream to be fulfilled rather than something as a reality which was existing because of the draining liquidity which is there in the market actually. But of course, I mean, one serious thing which has happened to the crude oil market, which is not applicable to the agriculture market, the commodity prices went into the negative territory. So, I was even expecting this, kind of a phenomenon happening because that we have many of the agriculture commodities which are delivery backed agricultural contracts, agricultural derivative contracts actually. Any serious disruption in the deliveries could also lead to a price pressure, but exchanges and the regulators did phenomenally well in terms of ensuring that there's no delivery pressure that is leading to prices plunging on the negative side, which is indicating a wrong signal over the producers and things like that actually. So as a result, what is the opportunity that I'm trying to plug it up over here? The agricultural information systems, which actually is pretty strong with USDA, and as you must be aware that USDA is the second most trusted agency after FIA in terms of publishing the global numbers for global agriculture production and things like that actually. And you won't believe that the number compilation, the number tallying and everything happens in such a secretive manner that 2 hours before everyone will have only their regional numbers, and they will go to the World Outlook Board, and at the World Outlook Board these numbers are combined and tallied with the various numbers, the trade numbers, the satellite data and everything, and that is released at 5 o'clock, and that is the time in which the floor of CME closes actually. So that is to say that this information will be consumed by the traders in the futures markets for discovering prices from tomorrow onwards in various crops, including grains, pulses, oilseeds, cotton, soybean, and things like that actually. So agricultural information system is very important in terms of price discovery and to provide a better price to the farmers actually. Second is that the finance minister had announced an 1 lakh crore agricultural infrastructure fund basically. And in that fund, I seriously believe that there should be serious testing, standardization facilities that should be set up at the rural level so that the farmers have access to testing and standardization rather than the traders at the market level having access to the testing and standardization. And there should be access to the warehousing, capacities also, which is pretty important actually. Just to put a number before you, the total India's GDP is 205 lakh crores, and assuming that we have 15%, which is being contributed by agriculture, the agricultural GDP is about 21 lakh crores actually. But if you look at the credit flow is just about 9 lakh crores actually. And of that 9 lakh crores, only 6 lakh crores is a crop loan, and rest is all like, the distribution to the businesses and processing industries and things like that actually. So that is a clear gap, and that gap can be fulfilled by way of increasing the, warehouse receipt based loans actually. So as of today, because of the WDRA, the Warehouse Development and Regulatory Authority, and the electronic repositories that have come into being, as of today, the warehouse receipt based loans is about 1 lakh crore rupees, and that's a very credible way of lending to the agriculture and the processing industry rather than ending up with an NPA and things like that actually. And for this to be enabled, I think, we will be happy to hear from Mr. Amit and everyone who's actually from the electronic platforms actually. For this to be enabled, these electronic receipts should be traded on electronic platforms, so that there is ample amount of price discovery happening on the electronic platforms, which has been announced by the, agriculture minister in terms of providing farmers with multiple, market platforms in terms of farmers accessing to sell their produce and things like that. So the WDRA coverage should, increase right now from about 15 to 20% to about 70 to 80%. And at the same time, the warehousing capacities also has the potential to increase over a period in time. And at the same time, the access to the warehouse receipts and financing should also be enhanced by creating a platform for trading the warehouse receipts and finding prices for the warehouse receipts actually. That's in short about from my side, having looked at this industry both from from a macro perspective and also from a commodity market perspective. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Amit bhai, now you please, because time is running out.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you for inviting me here. So without waste, a lot has been said by the Atul bhai and other panelists and you. So to set the perspective, I would like to congratulate first of all Government of India to bring such remarkable reforms in Indian agriculture that we have been waiting from last 20-25 years, and it's a watershed movement for Indian agriculture. So these three ordinances are a positive outcome for the Indian agriculture. It will create a future roadmap that will protect these small farmers' interests and also help them to get the best price directly from the processors. Earlier, now the processor, we have been dealing with the mustard oil processor, soybean oil processor. While farmer was allowed to sell anywhere in India, but these processors were they were. It was mandatory for them to buy only from mandis, APMC mandis, where they need to pay 4 to 5% intermediary cost in terms of they have to pay 1% to Pakka Adatiya and 2% to Kacha Adatiya and other transportation cost and all. So their cost of buying it is unnecessarily it was increasing by 5 to 6%, and there was a lot of wastage because in APMC mandis there is no warehousing facility. Like farmer, if they are coming with the goods, they have to sell their goods at in physical auctions, whether buyer is not there or not. So there was no price discovery mechanism available in full in transparent manner in APMC mandi. So with this ordinance, I think what I would like to stress is that the one market, one nation is meant to create a free market for all the participants in a fair, equitable, and profitable manner. So if you look at the the current scenario. While government has allowed to make it a free market. So the question is, are these the big processors, and are they they ready to buy directly from farmers? So my take is answer is no. They still require digital aggregators, company like us, who owns warehouses, who have warehousing network, and who have digital platform, mobile based platform, where farmers is able to offer their produce to the buyer, and they can bid it for that, and somebody is giving them assurance. While, because a farmer is not getting good price, so he can deposit the goods immediately on the warehouse, and he can take loan against their goods from the banks on warehouse receipt. So that's a futuristic model. And why these processors are not able to buy still because directly, because they have to set up a huge infrastructure which is not available right now. Like they have to set up small godowns, like we have small marketing elevators in Western countries, so they have to set up silos and all. For setting up small even silos, it's a very require a lot of capex. So better to empower farmers to build that kind of infrastructure. So what I want to say is we have to empower farmer community, that they have to become trader. Like they should not no longer be only farmers. The farming would be while be a main activity, but they can the like FPOs and the group of farmers, they can collectively build a small silos in their village. Like in every village have a school and other facilities, hospitals. So we should government should emphasis to build small silos in rural areas where farmer can deposit their commodity after harvesting, and whenever they are getting good price electronically, they can load that transportation to that commodity to the processor. So that's a futuristic model, and for that we require a lot of support from bank side. Like currently, if any farmer who want to take loan to build any infrastructure, he doesn't have any balance sheet, he doesn't have any kind of equity capital. So banks should consider their land as a equity capital, and they should give them at least 20 to 25 years long-term loan. The way bank give loan to housing for housings, the way we buy when we buy home, so we get 20 to 25 years loan. So farmers should get that kind of tenure, so they can build rural infrastructure quickly. If government expect that any corporate or any startup build the rural infrastructure, that will not happen. And it should build by the farmers and cooperatives and FPOs collectively. Once we build that kind of infrastructure, then this entire supply chain will be completely foolproof. If you look at the warehouse receipt-based financing, so we have been dealing in this warehouse receipt-based financing from last 15 years, and we have seen a lot of changes in that. So there are two kind of warehouses, where first is a professional warehouses, where collateral management companies operate warehouses on when they take on lease, and or they own these warehouses. So entire commodity is stacked in front of their supervisors and all. There's second kind of warehouse is a borrower's godown, that we call field warehouses. So banks should stop funding in field warehouses in where borrowers get to go down, because there's a high degree of chances of fraud in field warehouses, while professional warehouses are completely safe. In last 15 years, this industry has emerged from 1 crore to 45,000 crore, and in 45,000 crore, 50% share is from professional warehouses, where NPO is zero. This is the example of best short-term product for banking. Whereas in field warehouses, a lot of fraud happened. So as a collateral management managers, we have seen these differences. And bank now they have data of every geography, so they should promote professional warehousing. And similarly, government of India should promote professional warehousing. Today nowadays, only these private players use, big corporate use professional warehouses, services, and retail players. But if you look at the, FCI and NAFED and other cooperative agencies, which largely owned by the government, now not, using professional warehouses, whether it's accredited by WDRA. So what is the meaning for WDRA? If I am a warehouse owner and my warehouse is accredited by WDRA, which is the government authority, but FCI is not using my warehouse, and still they are building, they are investing in in their own warehouses, or they are giving opportunity by tender to few players. So what is the use of WDRA? If I'm an accredited agency by the WDRA, so then I should get that opportunity to get the material from FCI and other agencies. In India, in last 4 years, government is the biggest buyer of every most of the agri commodities. So this is the major challenge, whereby this professional warehousing has not been getting momentum. On the other hand, entire world, we have two marquee investors in our company. One is Singapore government, Temasek. They invested $40 million. Before that, Investcorp, they invested $30 million. Entire world, entire VC sector, entire PE fund, they want to invest in India. They want to invest in an agri-tech sector, agri-logistics sector, and they are ready to invest billions of dollars in this sector and startups. And if you look at the last 12 months, so the few few agri-tech startups, they were able to get at least collectively $1 billion funding from VCs, and this is a long-term capital. If Flipkart would not have got money from the initially from the investors, so they should not have they would not have become so big, and eventually that company was sold to Walmart in $16 billion. So that money, whatever they raised, so that money was used for generating employment, generating creating an infrastructure in warehouses for their operations and many other means. So the such kind of investment required in agri sector, we must understand that whenever any VC invest any single dollar, so they are not looking for these investment are very long term, 9 to 10 years investment, and it's not like a share market investment where somebody invests 1 rupees, and once the share is gives somebody get a 15 to 20% return, they just get their money in very quickly. So all I'm saying is government of India should encourage startups and give them opportunity to change this agriculture sector. And these startups do not require any kind of subsidy. These startups require healthy policies in all front. Like these ordinance, they have come, and in the past we have seen WDRA also. So my fear is that the government is doing its work again, the below government has done some and everything. The bureaucracy level, it should implement in a in more friendly manner, so that these startup can get capital, and they can build required soft and this physical infrastructure for this country. Now with this ordinance, what kind of opportunity will emerge? Now you take example of Amul. From ages, Amul has been buying milk from farmers. They were not able to buy crops from farmers, while they had around more than they have around more than 1.5 million farmers. So with this ordinance, they are now able to buy wheat and without going to mandi. So this gives them opportunity. But again, the question is where they will store. So they have to build infra on their own, or they have to encourage farmers to build infra. So again, my point again and again is on the liquidity part. So today, nowadays, in last 3 months, I just give you my points. In last 3 months, when this problem was started, COVID was started. So mandis were working in a very limited manner. So immediately we called by the Madhya Pradesh government and Rajasthan government, and we got e-mandi license. That time this ordinance was not there in place. So we started we were allowed to operate through we can sell any goods from farmers to to any processor. So it was like, they had given us, opportunity to do this trade. In 2 months time, we were able to build, we were able to transact around, 5,000 crore rupees of worth of material, right from, mustard, wheat, gram, and grapes, and a lot of commodities. So that kind of, surge we had seen on digital platform. So my limited point is like, if today's internet, due to internet penetration and other app which are very much available for for sure, like communication and social, like TikTok and all. So every these penetration has increased. So every farmer, every local level people are using app. So it's very easy for them to use this internet based infra. So in my view, these digital startups are like the future of this country, and India is a net exporter compared to China. China is a net importer. India has a great future. If you look at the production levels, we are we are number 1 or number 2 and number 3 in many commodities, and we have a lot of good chance to make Indian agriculture as a very rich thing. That's all from my side.
Thank you, Chandrasekhar ji. Yeah, please.
Okay, all right. Thanks. Such a delight for me to be on this panel. Come on. I want to compliment Business Standard for organizing this, especially in association with IMC. This is not the first event that IMC and BS do it together. We've done events in the past. And the topic that you have chosen, Rajesh, is excellent. Impact of COVID on food supply chain. I want to compliment also all my preceding, my co-panelists who brought in excellent and so many different dimensions to this issue. Therefore, that leaves for me much little to say, and I'm happy about it. There are two sides. Actually, one is a global value chain, GVC, and the impact of COVID on GVC. And second is the impact of COVID on our domestic supply chain. The distortions in the global value chain actually started in 2018 when we had huge trade friction between the US and China. That is a time the traditional well-established origin destination relationship actually got completely distorted, and new origins came up, new destinations came up, and countries started to explore new suppliers and new markets, which is fine. And this COVID-19 has actually accelerated that search for new origins, search for new markets, and search for new suppliers. Will this global value chain come back to pre-COVID levels anytime soon? I think not. I think it's going to be an extreme challenge, a challenge for the global value chain to come back to the pre-COVID levels from a global perspective. Can't believe this, sorry. From a global perspective, primarily because countries are now becoming increasingly inward looking rather than outward looking. This COVID-19 has made countries inward looking, and that's going to be a big challenge for the global economy and global trade. And we know that economies are going to be shrinking. Global economy is going to shrink in 2020. Trade is actually substantially slowed down, and all that is going to have a certain negative impact on the food supply chain. But from our country perspective, I think we have, as Atul and others pointed out, we have no worry whatsoever about food supplies. We have enough and more, and that's why in that context we need to welcome the government's initiative of supplying free rations to about 800 million people, and plus 180 million people, vulnerable families will get at least 1 kilo of pulses every month till November. It started in April, so there are, I think it's 8 months of supplies, free supplies is something, one of the world's largest and most ambitious welfare programs. This will not be possible without a fairly robust supply chain within the country. And therefore, we have a fairly well-established supply chain. Yes, it is not efficient. It is inefficient. We can cut down on the costs of intermediation and the supply chain and the transition of goods from the farm to food factories and then on to the food retail. Yes, it is possible. But this COVID-19 pandemic, lockdown, and related issues have now brought to the center stage some very serious, I would think, structural changes that, in my opinion, are likely to happen. Okay, and I'll talk about the structural changes that I'm expecting. The first one is I expect the governments, every government in most countries, and certainly our own government, there'll be increasing emphasis on food security, particularly through domestic production. And obviously, what else is Atmanirbhar Bharat that the Prime Minister talked about is increasingly self-reliance, and certainly from a food perspective. Fortunately, whether it is rice or wheat or pulses or sugar or cotton, we are substantially self-reliant. In fact, we are exporters of some of these commodities, and this is likely to continue. Edible oil could be an exception, but the government is certainly working on some very progressive policies that will also help boost our domestic edible oil production. Therefore, increased emphasis on food security, particularly through domestic production. The second one I'm expecting is COVID-19's impact on the food supply chain is increasingly this government, our government, will become welfare oriented. The welfare orientation of the government, the proof is already available. When the finance minister, when did she do? I think sometime in early April, talked about free ration distribution for 3 months, April, May, and June, which is now extended till November. I think, and therefore, welfare orientation will continue, and that will provide a huge boost to consumption of food products. And obviously, that also improve the marketability of the crop for the farmers, and that will also help us further strengthen and build efficiencies into the food supply chain. I'm expecting over the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, it's a process. Over the next several quarters, I'm expecting the process of what should I say, automation of this supply chain to pick up. One, I'm expecting increasing mechanization of agriculture. And second, from a supply chain perspective, I will not be surprised to see increasing automation, increasing use of technology, digitization, increasing use of blockchain, for example, in import and export trade. Already a large number of trades are now happening on the blockchain, which many importers and exporters have found very convenient. And for this COVID has brought about these changes to the supply chain. Therefore, there'll be huge amount of technology orientation to our supply chain. And consumption certainly has taken a big beating, particularly the out-of-home consumption, as Atul pointed out. It's also called the HoReCa segment, hotel, restaurant, catering. This segment has taken a big beating, and therefore, and it's a huge consumer of a very wide range of food commodities. And because there are no weddings, no meetings, no conferences, and no social gathering, obviously, to that extent, the consumption of food products would reduce. Partially compensated for by higher consumption at home, but travel, aviation, all these are economic activities where food is consumed. Therefore, that sector is going to take a big beating. I don't see that reviving anytime soon. Certainly not until the last quarter of this year. Maybe even a little beyond that. And then therefore, this is a time when food processing factories and food retail outlet will see increasing mechanization, digitization, contactless trading, etc. And then of course e-commerce will certainly get a boost. So therefore, this COVID, yes, I think it's a huge medical, social, and economic challenge. It's a curse, but what can we do? We need to face it, but we need to also look at the silver lining that it's going to bring in terms of increasing technology content in our day-to-day life, in our business, in our commerce, particularly in our food supply chain. I think that's going to be very positive. One point I want to make just in a minute's time, that I expect countries to become increasingly protectionist. The policy context around the world is becoming increasingly complex. Every country, every government, every administration is riding on the horns of a dilemma. What is that dilemma? They have on the one hand domestic, socio-economic and political compulsions. And on the other hand, they have international obligations under the WTO, under bilateral treaties, etc. Now, how do you harmoniously reconcile the conflict between domestic socio-economic compulsions and international obligations? This is a dilemma every country is facing, including the United States and of course India. And often I found that the domestic political socio-economic compulsions will override international obligation, and this is what this is what is going to happen increasingly. But we cannot shut ourselves off the world market. We've got to be aligned with the global value chain. Yes, Atmanirbhar Bharat is important, but we can't wish away crude oil import, for example. Our import dependence is 80%. We can't wish away edible oil import, certainly not in the short to medium term. Our import dependence is 70%. And therefore, what we need to take action, proactive steps now through research, through investment, through policy support to slowly start reducing our dependence on import, possibly generate genuine export surpluses in this country, which will obviously help once again strengthen the supply chain available in the country. But I'm looking at the future of a highly or gradually automated, efficient, digitized food supply chain, and that is going to bring in a huge amount of supply chain efficiencies. The benefit of these efficiencies, particularly cost efficiency, will certainly flow, a part of it will flow back to the growers, and particularly in the context of those 3 ordinances which the government has brought. I'm quite confident that the farmers will get the benefit of the new marketing. There's a paradigm shift in agri-marketing. They will certainly become the beneficiaries of these 3 ordinances, plus increasing efficiency in the Indian food supply chain. I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take.
Yeah, I have a quick round of discussion and interaction among the panelists, and I think.
Mr. Rajesh, we are not able to hear you.
Am I clear now?
Yes.
Yeah. So the point I was asking Atul Bhai, he made an interesting presentation, and India can be a self-reliant in edible oil. Now, what we have seen so far is that still there are several policy bottlenecks. There has to be a conducive policy framework to actually achieve this goal. And these issues, the government, it seems like it done so many things, but still just scratching a surface because of many more things are needed. But you may talk about the areas that you are looking.
Sorry, you want me to answer that?
Yes.
No, what you're saying is absolutely true. In fact, it is rather funny that today only we had a long conversation with the Agriculture Ministry on the National Mission on Oilseeds. In fact, we've also been part of that National Mission on Oilseeds, and it's been talked about for almost 2 years now. In fact, in 2 years, God knows how much of dust would have gathered on the policy. In fact, this is what, now I'm happy that they are removing the dust and trying to make it into a reality. But they are still living in not far removed from reality. In fact, we asked them, what is the kind of allocation you are talking in terms of having game-changing interventions as far as oilseed is concerned? What came out was not even a piddly amount. Not even we're talking about, and 90% of that would actually end up being spent in administration. So what we've suggested to the government is that unless and until you do not put in big money, game-changing event will not happen. And the intervention has to be game-changing because no country can afford to sacrifice its edible oil security to the extent of 70%, as Chandrasekharji rightly said. What we've suggested is you levy minimum 2,500 to 3,000 rupees per ton as cess and divert that money into oilseed development. Unless and until you don't start diverting 3,000 to 4,000 crore rupees annually, you will not be able to talk in terms of achieving self-sufficiency in edible oil even in the next 20-30 years. Hopefully that might sink in, but I do not know whether it will sink in or not. The other thing which we suggested, it's high time you convince the Punjab and Haryana farmer that they've produced enough of wheat and rice and the nation doesn't want that much to. It's a funny scenario that your storage is stressed. Government of India is pumping in a lot of money by way of food subsidy. So why not convert at least 25% of the land in that area into mustard and maybe corn and this thing? And obviously Punjab farmer will, or Haryana farmer will need to be given adequate incentive for conversion. So you've got to ensure that. So that is something which is also very, very important. So this is, I'm sure we are short of time, so I'll not probably talk much more on that. That's it from my side.
We have many more questions. I think Mr. Barwaleji, you spoke about seed industry in great details. But you know what has been observed since last few years is that many companies wants to innovate new seed varieties and all. But there are some issues coming up. So how do you see, and if you can say there is any progress happening or still much more need to be done?
Well, I think Rajesh Day point very well made. Of course, we are a seed company which is innovation driven, and we have, as you mentioned in your introduction, that we introduced BT cotton. I'll just take the point of oil seeds. It appears to be common to speakers, and it's a big problem. I think Atulji would know the numbers better, but our imports of edible oil on an annual basis are in the range of 60 to 70,000 crores of rupees. And there have been discussion that how we can become self-sufficient. Atulji would know that there was a technology mission on oilseeds, which, many years back, again, in the Ministry of Agriculture, where cultivation of sunflower seed, hybrid sunflower, was encouraged in Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, and with a very strong incentive given to farmers there, with a strong procurement price, MSP. And I think there were, over a period of 3 or 4 years, our imports of edible oil became very minimal. However, the support price mechanism for sunflower was removed on the pretext of that the consumer must get the oil at a lower price. So the point is that policy driven, as Atulji rightly pointed out, rice and wheat are grown primarily because there is a MSP and the farmer feels secured that he has a buyer for his produce. For everything else, he is at risk and he has to take the market risks. So there are technologies in oil seeds, starting with soybean, mustard, cotton, where oil yields can be enhanced significantly, but the environment which can enable seed companies to bring these technologies to the farmers is required. And somehow, the approach of the government has been, probably not conducive for such technologies to come in and be able to provide incentive to the seed companies or the innovators. We recognize the importance of traditional technologies, traditional farming, Vedic farming, and that is our history, and we should definitely do research on that. But at the same time, it is, I think, very crucial if we want to become Atmanirbhar, for pulses, Atmanirbhar for oil seeds. I think in a 5-year time frame, it can be achieved, provided the government acts in a manner they acted during COVID, what Atulji and we experienced, and government can do it now. But the policies are there. You must encourage research. Now government has taken away the research expenditure deduction. I think this year it will become 0. And again, the scale, I think very important. Everybody thinks agriculture doesn't require any capital. That the big thing is they feel that, and they always think farmer must get everything free, which farmer doesn't want, but the government thinks so, and therefore the policies get sort of distorted. And see, take an example: 60,000-70,000 crores of rupees of import of edible oil, or 10,000-20,000 crores of import of pulses. Where is this money going? This money is going to farmers in other countries. And they have started growing these things for export to India, like Canada, Australia, Malaysia, Thailand. They are growing things because India is importing. So we are supporting their farmers and not supporting our farmers. So we definitely need encouraging policies for research and development. And as said by other speakers, and what we know, there has been some traction on edible oil seeds last couple of months, through Mr. Nitin Gadkari ji and others, and let's see what's the outcome. Hopefully something positive comes out.
Thank you. I think some questions are coming up, and even I am also curious to know briefly. Mr. Shunmugam say, actually for doubling the farmer income is only talked, and in real sense it is not seen that way. So if you can briefly tell us why it is so, and do you see that happening at least say by 2022-24 is being talked about with these reforms?
Okay. See, I mean, it's what we are seeing as, farmers' income and the income which is earned in the other sectors is actually a sectoral friction. And doubling of farmers' income, I would not, numerically count that as a doubling of, if he's receiving 10 rupees, he should be getting it, 20 rupees or something like that. in terms of terms of trade, in economics, we call it as terms of trade, actually. The agriculturists or the farmers should get a better terms of trade compared with, anyone else in the manufacturing sector or anyone else in the, this one, actually. So doubling of word, as a, as a word is, something which is, which should not be directly correlated to the literal meaning of doubling, but it is to mean that the price realization by the farmer should increase over a period in time, actually. So in order to get it done, I think, whatever the measures that have been announced by the government is, start of the road, and it was also, enunciated by Chandrasekhar ji and other speakers in the panel, and also by one of the audience over there, actually. So I would put it, to take this, reforms to a logical end in terms of enhancing farmers' access to the markets and farmers' access to the information, and so informed decision making at the sowing level to informed decision making at the marketing level. Actually, we need to do a few of the things. One is strengthen our agricultural information systems. So when, that is to say that one, agriculture production information, agriculture marketing information, the storage information, and the price information would have to be as transparent as possible, and it needs a lot of reforms basically at the institutional front, actually. Second, available warehousing capacities would have to be enhanced. The standards and grading would have to be simplified, actually. So we have a standards and grading system is pretty much complicated, which has to be as simple as that. Like, in US, when you talk about corn, they have grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. Actually, that is to say that grade 1 is for human consumption. Whichever that meets that grade 1 is, fit for human consumption can go in for sale. They don't say that it has to meet this, it has to meet that. If it is fit, can go in for human consumption, grade 1. Grade 2 is, whatever that doesn't meet, can get into the industrial consumption, or grade 3, it can go into the feed consumption. So, utility-based standards and grades should be coming up, and the facilities for standardization, testing, certification, and grading and packaging should be available at the taluka level, so that the farmers' access to these, this one can increase. Because sitting in the commodity markets, I've seen what literal benefits that farmer could derive when a particular ecosystem around that particular commodity develops, including marketing, standardization, grading, and things like that. They immediately get about 20 to 30%, because the intermediaries are cut out of the the entire this one, and the margin in doing that also is cut off, actually. Second, the bank funding of the warehouse receipts would have to increase, actually. So that actually would increase the access to credit for the farmers, actually. So in order to get that done, not only that, we should have a the government should mandate the WDRA to cover almost all the warehousing capacities that is available. So one of the issues which Mr. Amit was talking about could effectively be resolved, if there were warehousing capacities there is no warehousing capacity which is non-WDRA accredited, actually. So if there is if all the facilities are accredited, then they will become equally competitive. They'll be able to provide services to this one. And at the same time, these electronic warehouse receipts should also be traded on trading platforms. So my second suggestion is trading platforms for electronic warehouse receipts. It doesn't lead to any movement of the commodities and things like that. Movement happens only when somebody needs to consume it finally, rather than just for the price discovery, actually. The third one, even if you look at today's just search it out, who's the successful FPO in the country. Sahyadri Farms have their own website, actually, and so they have actually done the aggregation of almost like 26,000 acres, actually, of about something like 1,500 farmers, actually. So to say that FPOs have been witnessing little less success, and has also are fed up with more of regulatory, more of challenges in terms of the trust of the farmers, their ways of operations and things like that. So in order to put a full stop to it, there has to be an institutional mechanism for regulating the setting up and functioning of FPOs actually. So that is, another thing which, going forward, the government should look at if they are serious about enhancing the selling and the buying power of the farmers actually, so that their incomes can be increased. So these are like, 3 or 4 suggestions which I would say, if at all, if increasing the farmers' income is seriously thought about, the government should give a way forward in terms of moving across. Thank you, Rajesh.
Now, see, I have less time to have interaction, but I'm discussing the points that I have along with some questions. And this is for Agarwal. This ENAM platform is
your voice is not coming.
Yeah. What I was saying that ENAM platform is not picking up. Talk about the make the for farmers. You know this platform, know this industry. You may say, tell us which are the major challenges, why it is not happening.
Sir, ENAM, why it is not like, picking up from last 5 years, while it was a very good initiative by the government, because of, earlier there's this, it is APMC is a state government subject, and ENAM was not getting, permission, independently from last 4 years. So they it has become like, in recent days, it is a mandi software. Entire whatever like crops are coming in the mandis, they are punching all the data. So today ENAM is sitting on a huge data, but they were not able to do, convert as a transaction platform. So now with this change of law, with this, ordinance, I think ENAM has a ENAM will be like the platform like we have IRCTC. For ticketing. So ENAM will be available on all the format in all the states, and any farmer, any seller, can transact very easily. So that was the hindrance from the state government side. Secondly, what ENAM is now thinking is to give access to other trading platform to give as a plug-in facility. Like we run a AgriBazaar, so we can we can be as a partner of ENAM, and if we are getting good farmers, and if ENAM is having a buyer, so both can transact very seamlessly. So that will happen in future. So if you look at the ordinance, so it is clear-cut mentioned that electronic platform will be given priority by the ENAM. So I think so that's the answer. So ENAM has got the way after this ordinance.
So let's hope that to happen.
Yes, sir.
But there is interesting. We would like to hear from Mr. Chandrasekhar, because all this taken, but without proper regulations on electronic market. I'm saying, and it will be incomplete, and we have not heard much on that ground. So it's your domain. You may tell us how this will be regulated. What needs to be done?
You're talking about electronic markets, right?
Yeah.
Right. There are 2 issues in this. One is, of course, quality standardization. We need to have in our country increasing quality standardization. This is one. And if we don't have increasing quality standardization, then we must have for every product some kind of a tolerance limit, upper and lower tolerance limit, and prices should be decided on a basis variety, and there could be a premium and a discount. The second one is a payment. Will payment be instant, or will it be T1 transaction plus 1 day or 2 days or whatever? I think that also needs to be looked into. But the most important thing is for the electronic platforms to attract farmers and farmer producer companies. They need to gain the confidence of the farmers. And gaining the confidence of the farmer in a sense that the farmer feels comfortable saying, let me offer my product on this platform and I'm most likely to get a reasonably good price. That confidence needs to be built, and that his product will be accepted, will be transacted, and he will get his money. Maybe same day, next day, T+1 or T+2, whatever. I think that building of that confidence is extremely important. And that is where these platforms will have to go and market their services to farmers. But obviously, they cannot go to 140 million farmers individually. Therefore, they should start dealing with farmer producer companies. Each farmer producer company has 200, 300, 400, 500 farmers, and it is run by a CEO, and who understands, most likely he understands the electronic markets. And therefore, if these electronic platforms reach out to FPOs, farmer producer organizations and companies, they will be in a much better position to take advantage of this transparent electronic platform. And that will have a snowballing effect, and other farmers will also start looking at this. The government has also said they want to set up 10,000 FPOs in the next 1 year. So that is also going. So it's a process. It's not a destination. It's not an event. It's a process, and it'll be a continuous process of awareness, education, training, and hand-holding and building capacity amongst farmers.
Thank you. I think time is running out, but let me first briefly sum up what we have discussed. And as Atulji has rightly pointed out, to be really a self-reliant, we need to revive those technology mission and even national mission on oilseeds. Though many more things are required, as he suggested. Even for seeds, which is a very important input, and Barwani did mention that government need to have a conducive policy atmosphere to see that many more new technologies are introduced. And it means something should be honored for IP, etc. Even doubling the farmers' income, yes, there are many challenges, as Mr. Shunmugam mentioned. And Amitji also mentioned about the bottlenecks in success of e-markets and what need to be done. But, and Mr. Chandrasekhar, yes, we have noted your suggestions, some 2-3 important regulatory aspects that need to be addressed. And with this, I'll thank all of you and Indian Merchant Chamber to be part of this event. There is also a protocol that we offer mementos and flowers to participants, panelists. But here we all have to be satisfied with emoji flowers. Thank you very much.
You can send it virtually.
You
can give a virtual memento.
Virtual memento.
Thank you, Mr. Rajesh, for amazing
God
session.
Bless God bless. Yeah.
Thank you everyone to be part of the session, and thank you Business Standard for associating with IMC for this event. Thank you all the panelists for amazing session and giving us insights about and giving your valuable time for the event. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.